And here's just a little funny cartoon where you have some competitors talking about it's risky, of course. If we're caught, it could mean many hours of community service. So, it's a situation where you have a business person saying, yeah, what's the worst that's going to happen to me? I'm just going to, be in home detention, and it's a slap on the wrist, right? I'm not going to go to jail. And it's funny because there's truth to this in a sense that when I first started with the DOJ in the 1990s, I worked in Texas, and there were a lot of cases in Texas, and I did construction cases, insulation, plumbing, and we could catch these guys who were doing this, but really the hardest part of the job at that time in Texas was not catching the bad guys. The hardest part of the job was convincing the judge in Texas to put him in jail, because the judge would look at one of our defendants, and they would see a businessman who's never been convicted of a felony before, and maybe the person has been big in charity, and is a member of a country club, and so the judges would say, I'm not going to put that guy in jail. I'm going to give him home detention where he has to stay at home for a few weeks, or he's allowed to go to work, or he's allowed to go to church. So you just have to kind of stay at home at night. But that changed gradually. That really changed, and I'll show you some statistics. But before I do that, let me just tell you what the penalties are. In the U.S., a corporation the statutory maximum is $100 million. An individual can pay $1 million fine. And this was increased a few years ago to 10 years imprisonment. 10 years imprisonment for one of these violations. And there could be a fine of twice the gain or twice the loss. And essentially what this means is that the DOJ can go over the $100 million if they can prove, or the defendant admits, that the crime was worse than a $100 million fine. And the DOJ, in fact, many times now has gotten fines well over $100 million, the highest being $500 million in the vitamins cartel. And here are some statistics to show you that the fines for these violations are going up substantially. This year was 2009 over $1 billion, but the DOJ it's gone from the a period in the 1990s averaging 169 million, now into probably 500 million or more a year. So there are very significant fines involved. And this goes back to my Texas story. Back in the 1990s, only 37% of defendants went to jail. Most of them got community service, home detention. And now it's almost 80% of judges sending these defendants to jail. So there's really been a change in the mindset of the judiciary in the United States. It's taken time to get there. I understand, as I was saying earlier, that your antitrust authority has been very aggressive. And in fact, it's well known throughout the world as being one of the most aggressive agencies, along with the United States. There have been, I believe, 40 people who have been sentenced to jail here. As I understand it, most of those cases are under appeal or pending appeal, but it certainly looks like somebody in Brazil is going to be going to jail sometime soon. I mean, that's just the odds. It seems like it's going that way. And I understand there's 300 other criminal investigations ongoing, and the fines here have also been going up as well. Very big fines. I saw some statistics where, the industrial gases cartels case, which I'm sure you're aware of, was nearly 1.7 billion reals. There's a security services cartel, the vitamins cartel. Interestingly, dealing with these kinds of industries, road building, there's a crushed rock cartel where it was approximately 60 million reals, as well as a cement cartel that was prosecuted in 2007 where there was 43 million reals. So you've got a very aggressive enforcement regime here, and I think business people in Brazil need to be concerned about, if it's a domestic company, about what the agency here is going to be doing, because there's a history of aggressive enforcement. I understand that the new Secretary of Economic Law has said that one of his goals now in coming in to office is going to be to aggressively prosecute bid rigging. Bid rigging is going to be a focus. And I think that is very smart and makes a lot of sense in the context of what we have been talking about here today, and that is all the infrastructure that's being built, all the money that's at stake, and the roads that are being built, and the tolls that are being administered. So a couple more stats. The DOJ measures jail days. Those have been going up, the number of days people spend in jail total, all the defendants each year, and the average months of incarceration. And so you could see, back in the 90s, it was 8 months. That was the average sentence an individual would get. And now, in 2010, it's 30 months. So 2.5 years is how long people, on average, are spending in jail for bid rigging or price fixing. I would say for bid rigging, it's probably higher than this, because bid rigging, there's an actual enhancement in the sentencing guidelines in the United States so that a court can sentence an individual to more jail time if it's a bid rigging crime as opposed to price fixing. And why is that? Bid rigging is viewed across the board, generally viewed as something, as a crime that's more egregious. It's the worst type of, and the most harmful type of competition violation, because it's taxpayer money that's involved, and the government is a victim, essentially. And so in that kind of situation, the courts generally view it as being something that's more harmful and worse. These are some other violations that DOJ often prosecutes, and along with price fixing or bid rigging. You'll see bribery, gratuities, kickbacks when someone's trying to get a contract from a government agency. Very often, the investigators will find that maybe there's a relationship between the procurement official and the company that's involved. And so DOJ will closely scrutinize those kind of relationships, to see if the government official was getting anything in return for giving a contract at an inflated price, getting a kickback. FCPA, Foreign Corrupt Practices Act, where the United States prosecutes companies that will, U.S. companies that will bribe foreign officials. Those kind of cases have been seen recently with price-fixing cases. False and fictitious claims could relate to government contracts, putting in a claim that for work that wasn't done. That's something that the DOJ would prosecute. Conspiracy to defraud, false statements. This is another one that really relates to bid rigging. And I know that Brazil now has made it mandatory, or at least I believe, that contracts now have to have what's called a certificate of independent bid determination. And I think that was as 2009 that was put into place. And the U.S. has had that, has tried to have government agencies put this clause in. But basically what it is it's a clause that goes into any kind of bid form. And so that when a company puts in its bid, they have to certify that they haven't talked about their bid, they haven't discussed the pricing on the bid with any other company, and that their price, that their bid is independent, that they derive that independently. And so they're certifying up front when they submit that bid. They won't take the bid, the agency, unless that certificate is in there. They're certifying up front that this is a competitive bid. They haven't discussed this with anyone else. Now, what if that's not true? What if they're lying? Well, this gives the prosecutor an extra tool. And the Brazilian prosecutors, now that these kind of clauses are being used, are going to have the same tool. And that tool is to be able to charge the company or whoever submitted that bid with making a false statement to a government agency. Because you are submitting that certificate under penalty of perjury. You are swearing, in essence, that your bid is competitive, that your bid is independent. And if the government finds out that, hey, you know what, that's not true, that you were actually discussing that bid beforehand with your competitor, they can prosecute you for false statements. So now that those kind of clauses and those certificates are being required in Brazil, I think you're going to see these kind of cases, prosecutors bringing these kind of false statement cases. Mail and wire fraud, basically someone who's rigging bids, if they're mailing their bids in using the postal service to help them commit this crime, the DOJ could charge them with mail fraud, which is a separate crime. So in other words, they could be charged with bid rigging, Sherman Act violation, the base violation. They could be charged with submitting a false statement under a certificate of independent bid determination, and they could be charged with mail fraud if they mailed their bid in through the mail. So there are a lot of other violations and tools that the prosecutors will have in prosecuting these cases. Lastly, there's obstruction of justice. This is, I should say last but not least, because in almost every case that I was involved in as a prosecutor over 20 years, it was almost inevitable that when somebody got a subpoena, somebody heard that there was an investigation, what's the first thing they do? Do they call their lawyer? That's probably what they should do. No, they run to the document cabinet, the file cabinet, get the shredder out, and they start shredding documents as fast as they can. Bad idea. Don't do that, because that gives the prosecutors yet another tool. And the penalties for obstruction in the United States are 20 years. It's twice the penalty if you're trying to cover up your crime by destroying evidence, by getting somebody to lie. So it's a very serious violation that we would often see. All right, the kind of things that prompt an investigation: you can get a tip from an insider, a tip from an ex-employee. And I understand that in the Brazilian, one of the Brazilian investigations, I think it was I may be wrong about this, the crushed rock investigation, that the Brazilian investigation started with an anonymous tip. Somebody just called in and said, you know, these companies have software where they know exactly what the other company is going to charge, and it started just with an anonymous tip. Obviously, it was somebody inside one of the companies that didn't like what was going on, but that's how investigations can start. Another big way these investigations will start is through amnesty or leniency applications. And what this is basically when a company finds out this type of conduct, or an individual from the company comes in, if they come to the government and report, if they self-report, they say, look, my company was doing this, we just found out about it, one of the employees was doing this, they self-report that. In the US and in Brazil, that company can get amnesty or leniency, which means that they don't have to pay a fine, one of these huge fines. And more importantly, it means that the executives from that company don't have to go to jail. They're not prosecuted if they cooperate with the investigation. Brazil has a very effective leniency program. They've had over 20 applications that have started investigations. The United States, most of the investigations now are started through one company turning in one of the other companies. And so it's a real risk now for companies that are involved in these schemes, bid rigging, price fixing, that one of their competitors at some point might get nervous, an employee might report it to the government, and the other company will get leniency. And that leaves the company that didn't get leniency in a very bad position.